my name's Cody Olerking, and I am here to bring you the third video in my spooky stories for the Spooky Month, or Spooky Stories in Spook Month. And this time, I'm getting at it a little, earlier than last time, but still kind of late in the day. I got up earlier, but I thought it would be nice to record it later at night or in the evening, and I just now got around to it. So, without any more stalling, let's just get right to it, shall we? The first story is around the word puppy. This will be fun. So, there was this couple. They were kind of going back and forth about whether they really wanted children or not. The man really wanted a kid. He really wanted a son or a daughter to help raise because he really always wanted to be a father all throughout his life. Meanwhile, the woman was of the mindset that they should really do it when they're more prepared. She didn't really know if she wanted any kids yet. And it was just kind of a back and forth that happened for a while. And then they came to a decision. The man said, well, why don't we just start off by getting a puppy? If you love that puppy and if you are as motherly to that puppy as I think that you can be, then how about we revisit having kids? And she said, okay. So they went to this little dog shelter and asked if there were any puppies for sale.
Well, I don't know. Puppies are they get taken very quickly. Everyone loves a good puppy. They think they're just too cute. They don't last very long here,
said the old man running the shelter. He took a quick look at the paper and he said,
well, no, it doesn't look like we have a lot of puppies. Well, we do have one, but no one really likes that one.
The man said, just let us go and see him and we'll take him. The old man looked at the two, gave them a very scrutinous gaze, and the man thought that he could see a little bit of pity in the eyes before he finally said,
all right. Well, just follow me then.
The two went with him behind the desk into the entrance of where all the dogs were. All these dogs that were taken from one way or the other from either irresponsible owners or just were wild dogs. And there were some really cute ones, some that looked like they could really use a good home. And every single dog they passed by tugged at their heartstrings a little bit. But the further and further they got, the more and more dire straits the dogs looked. They went from being these wide-eyed and bushy-tailed mutts to being these dejected old dogs that kept looking down at the ground. Even when they passed by one that looked a little happy to see them, it didn't really get up. They made their way to the very back of the place, and the old man looked at him again and said,
are you sure that you want to look at this one then?
Well, yeah, said the man. Of course we want to look at him. Why else would we come here? The old man looked at them for a little bit before finally nodding and opening the door for them.
All right. This one the other workers have referred to as Shadow. Please introduce yourselves to him,
he says. The couple go through the door, and then they hear it close behind them. While a lot of times that wouldn't make someone jump. I mean, they just probably closed the door so the dog couldn't get out. This one sounded heavier than the doors you would usually think of. It wasn't like a wooden door, it sounded kind of like a metal clang, like you would expect from a prison. They looked around, and then there were these little yellow and red eyes that were staring back at them. They waited for a little bit, and then this little dog came over. He was just a puppy, but for some reason, their hearts pounded a little in their heads, in their chests when it came to them. They felt a little nauseous as the gaze of the pup looked from the man to the woman. And then it finally subsided after the puppy just started walking a little bit more towards them. They thought maybe there just must have been something in the air or something. So the man bent down and put his hand out to the dog. The dog sniffed at his hand and gave it a quizzitive lick. For a split second, the man thought that there was a searing pain that came from where that dog licked, and he pulled his hand back. But when he looked at his hand, the pain was gone and there wasn't any marks, so he put his hand back out and the dog nuzzled up against it. The man and the woman looked at each other. There were some slight reservations, but at the end of the day, they felt like this dog would probably be in good hands with them. So the woman picked up the pup, and the man put his arm around her, and they knocked on the door to be let out. The old man opened the door and looked a little bit shocked that the woman was already holding Shadow.
Well, it seems I misjudged you. Come along back and we'll finish the paperwork.
The trail back to the front wasn't, there wasn't much to talk about other than they could almost hear flopping down from all the old dogs in the cages when they passed by. They took a look back and the old man said,
"Don't worry about them. Their time was coming anyway."
And continued on. The man and the woman didn't think too much of it. They just kept going. All the while, that puppy that was in the woman's arms seemed to get just a little bit heavier. When they got to the front, they went by business as usual. They signed some papers. They, did anything you would do when you just pick up a puppy from a pound. The woman reached to her purse to get the money, but the old man said,
No, no, no. You're doing us a favor here. He couldn't be here as long as he should have been, but please take him.
The couple looked at the man and then each other and then the puppy, but they weren't going to look a gift horse in the mouth. They walked out the door, and they could almost swear that they heard the old man sigh in relief as they left. The walk back to their home was an eventful one, to say the least. Every once in a while, a bird dropped out of the sky. There was once that they saw a squirrel actually run into the road to get hit by a car. All these very, very bad things just kept happening, but they couldn't really think much of it. I mean, it was just random, terrible occurrences, right? They got home and they put the dog down, and immediately the puppy went over to the middle of the floor and laid on their rug. It was almost like it knew it was home. The couple smiled at each other and went and sat down on the chairs that were near the pup. All was well for the rest of that evening, and in the night they went to bed and the puppy followed them. However, they didn't really get a restful night's sleep. Their dreams were plagued by glowing red eyes and barking laughter. Every time they woke up in the middle of the night, their puppy was sleeping right in the middle of them, but it didn't look too vicious or anything, so they would go back to sleep and once again be met with the glowing red eyes. This continued on for a while. Anytime they'd walk the dog, at least one or two things would happen that shouldn't have happened. Be it a random ball breaking a window, or a squirrel getting electrocuted on a wire fence. Just a whole bunch of terrible occurrences. And then when they brought the dog home and went to bed, they would always have nightmares. This kept on going for years, and every single day the dog got bigger and bigger and bigger. It kept going until about a year later, their dog was the size of a Great Dane, and its fur was pitch black, with its gray paws that always seemed a little bit ashen. The two of them have been taking care of that dog for the whole year, and the dog was delighted with them. Always lathered them with licks and gave them its little dog nuzzles. All in all, it was actually pretty good. The older the dog got, the less the nightmares came, but the more bad things seemed to happen. Their pipes broke, random strikes of lightning would break windows, their TVs broke. Every once in a while, the electricity would go on the fritz. Just thing after thing after thing happened. And then one day, when they got up in the morning, the dog wasn't there anymore. They looked everywhere for the dog, but the only thing they found was a smashed out window. They almost went to look for the dog, but when they got out of the door, there was an old voice.
Stop.
They looked in the direction of the voice and saw the old man from the shelter.
He's decided that he's plagued you enough. Don't look for him. He's going to find his next prey. But thank you for taking care of him when you did.
The two looked understandably confused, and the old man just looked back at him, and they realized a little bit of something that was not really noticeable when they first saw him for the little bit they did. His eyes almost seemed to glow under the shade of his hat.
Thank you for all that you did. And now, why don't you go back to your daily lives?
He said, before turning around and walking away. The couple shouted out to him, but he never turned around and answered. He seemed to disappear in the woods, and they could never find him or the dog when they looked. The couple did decide to have a baby later on, though, and from what I hear, it was a very healthy child. Okay, so there was that one. I think I could have probably done a little bit better, but the next one is going to be another good one, I think. So, if any of you know a little bit about ancient Egyptian mythology, you'll know that they thought that cats were the guardians of the underworld. Well, I can tell you from what I heard that that's definitely the case. You see, once there was this old man who, after he died, he left everything to his grandson, including his cat. The grandson knew about this cat, and he loved this cat. This cat had been with his grandpa for almost all of his life. And the cat and the man were good friends. So when he got the cat from his deceased grandpa, he was ecstatic, to say the least. His parents always thought it was kind of weird that the cat wasn't as, well, didn't seem as old as it was. It was still spry, and it still had a spring in its step with every single step that it took. Well, the man left his parents' house and got his own apartment so that he can take care of the cat better, and so that he could just get out from under his parents' roof. We've all been there, right? Well, the man had a pretty good apartment, and the landlord loved the cat, so it was a pretty good deal all around. The only thing that bugged him was every once in a while the cat would look at the front door to the apartment, and it would arch its back, and the hair on the back of the cat would stand straight up. Every once in a while he would hear a growl or a hiss from the cat right before a knock at the door came. The cat would growl even more, and then the person behind the door would eventually walk away. The man thought this was just the cat defending its territory from intruders. I mean, that's what we all would think, right? Well, one day the man was being a little bit late to get back to his apartment. His work was really held him back for a long time. And he knew that he had to get home to the cat, but he also had food out for the cat and milk and water out for the cat so that it would get its food and water and it would be all fine and dandy. So he was just taking a nice relaxing walk back to the apartment when he heard these slow footsteps going behind him. There wasn't a lot of weight to them, but they were lumbering. His heart began to take up the pace of the footsteps, and he got a little worried as they seemed to get closer and closer. Every single step, no matter how fast he walked. Soon he began running when he saw that his apartment's complex was right there, and the footsteps picked up pace. He was getting more and more panicked as time went on. He even called out, "Stay back! I don't know who you are, but stay away from me!" And then the only thing that answered was a sick and demented laugh. He ran, and the footsteps picked up pace. He got to his door. He opened the door with the key, and then, just when it looked like the thing was about to pounce on him, his cat darted from the doorway. And then there was a hiss and fire. Or at least he thought it was fire. It was warm enough to be. And when he turned around, there was a pile of ash in some boots and an old trench coat. And there was his cat before it, licking its paws. The man went to pick up the cat, who just nuzzled into him, and he brought him inside. That cat got a good treat that night. Extra rich cream. And maybe a little bit of fish. Okay, so there's that one. I know that I could probably get these stories out better if I wrote them down first, but I think it's a lot of fun to just come up with them on the spot. So with that done, let's go on ahead and go to the third one. Well, once there was a college student let's call him Chad. Now, Chad and I weren't that great of friends, but we had the same classes every once in a while. Chad was an interesting person, to say the least. He was kind of into himself and little and smart as hell, but he really wasn't what I would call the best person. You see, he took advantage of women, men, whatever he wanted. And he had no concept of money, because anytime that he got it, he'd spend it on the most frivolous things you could think of. Except for one thing. He spent a lot of it. There was one thing that wasn't as frivolous, but probably the strangest thing. You see, he went to this strange website that was dealing with the occult. He loved that stuff. And he found something that sounded really odd. On that site, they had an old chair that they said belonged to Vlad the Impaler. For those of you that don't know, Vlad the Impaler is who this was one of the main inspirations for Dracula. Well, Chad had to have that chair, so he ordered it. Cost him a big chunk of his money, but he didn't care. I was there when he got the chair, and for all intents and purposes, it looked just like a regular chair. Old, yeah. I mean, it looked like the thing was about to fall apart, but there wasn't really anything to that, and I wondered why he spent so much money on it. He said he wanted to feel like the Prince of Darkness himself. He said that he wanted to feel the power that would come from sitting in the same chair as Vlad the Impaler. I thought he was just crazy. But, I'm not going to tell him that to his face. Well, one day I stopped by his apartment after him having that chair for a couple of weeks, and I gotta say, the place stank a little bit. He invited me in and was actually very cordial. I wasn't really used to that with him. And the place wasn't a sty like it usually was. He liked to live without picking a lot of stuff up, so I was used to going in there and probably seeing a couple pizza boxes, some old clothes. Wasn't any of that this time, though. In fact, a lot of stuff was missing from the place that I thought would be there. I would go there to play some Super Nintendo or just watch some old movies, but the TV and all the game systems were gone. And in the middle of the room was just that old chair. He sat in it, and he gave me this smile that was the creepiest smile I'd ever seen. And I love horror movies, so I've seen some creepy smiles. But he just sat there and tinted his fingers while giving me that smile. He looked at me with wild eyes. And then he said, "Why don't you sit in this chair? It's a great chair." I said, "Nah, no thanks. I wouldn't want to break it anyway." I mean, He didn't really take to that joke. In fact, I think he thought I was talking seriously, and he said, "Oh, no. Don't worry. This chair will be able to support you." I was at a little bit of a loss for words. I mean, this is the creepiest that I'd ever seen Chad act. And I was just like, Chad, why don't we just go get something to eat or something? He said, "Oh, don't worry. I've got something to eat here. Why don't you take a seat first? Here, I'll get up for you." I didn't really want to get in that chair. uh, Call me weird, but just seeing how weird Chad was acting and just seeing that chair be the focal point of the room just made me feel a little bit weird. Nah, I don't think I'll go. I'm good, Chad. Why don't you just sit down? Do you want to play some games? I said, hoping to at least get a little bit of the creepiness out of the room.
Games?
He said.
Why would I have those foolish child things?
I was a little taken aback by that. I mean, Chad was one of the people that I always played games with. You know, he was one of the ones that would always get the old games from the mom and pop shops and be just like, hey, look what I found. We'd play anything from the old Final Fantasy games to Chrono Trigger. So hearing him just disregard them like that was strange. You know, Chad, why don't we just eat? I said.
Well, all right. But I really do suggest that you sit down while we eat,
he said. I thought for a little bit and I said, well, sure, just give me a different chair. He seemed to not really like that answer, but consented and pulled out one of the old dining room chairs that he had. And then he pulled out a bowl with a red liquid in it and a loaf of bread. Well, I mean, aren't we going to have anything more substantial? I mean, you know, I love bread, but just bread and a dip. A very liquid-like dip. A red liquid-like dip. That doesn't sound that filling. Well, Chad set him down. He pulled off a part of the loaf of bread and dipped it in that red sauce. And then flicked it into his mouth. He gestured that I do the same, and as I tore off a piece of the bread and dipped it in the red sauce, I pulled it up and I couldn't eat it. That stench was so foul. I pulled it up to my mouth again and I smelled again and it just smelled rank. Like, I don't know if any of you've had to clear out dead mice and rats and all that kind of stuff, but if you leave them alone for a while, they start to decompose and it just smells foul. That was almost like the smell that I had when I pulled that piece of bread up to my nose. I put it back and I got up and I said, you know what, Chad, I think I have to go. Well, Chad was a little disappointed in that, but he nodded and I opened the door and I ran. I haven't gone back to Chad's place since, but I heard some interesting rumors. You see, I knew a couple more people that were friends with Chad, and I tried to get a hold of them, and when I didn't actually hear back from them, I went to check with some of their other friends, and they said the last person they heard them hanging out with was Chad. I hope nothing happened to them. But, you know, I'm sure nothing did. I'm sure they're fine. Alright. That was what I thought of when I had the chair one. These last two are going to be kind of fun because one is of a food that I hate and one is of a drink that I like. The food is avocado. And yeah, I know. A lot of people love avocado. I just don't like it. It has this slimy texture to it. And that's all that I can think of whenever I try to eat it by itself, is just the slimy texture and how it just doesn't taste much of anything. So, I know a lot of you guys are going to be surprised when I say that I had to get an avocado one time. Yeah, I know. I just said I hate it, but it was going to be made into guacamole, and even though I don't like avocado, I do like guacamole. I brought the little bag of avocados home and was going to start making the guacamole, but there's just something about these avocados that just, I don't know, it gave me pause. I I eventually shrugged it off and I took my knife and I chopped into one of them, but for some reason the knife sank all the way through. No stopping at the seed, none of that, just sank all the way through. I looked down at the cutting board and was kind of shocked when I saw red on the cutting board. I opened up the avocado and there in the middle of it, instead of a seed, was a giant eye. It didn't... I couldn't get that picture out of my mind. It was just an eye in the middle of an avocado. How is that possible? Well, I mean, that wasn't the only thing strange about that avocado, because when I smelled it, it smelled terrible. Like, it smelled like raw meat. I'm not talking regular raw meat, I'm talking rancid raw meat. Like the kind of stuff that you would expect flies to be buzzing all around. Ugh. It was not a great avocado. So I threw that away and I got a different one. And I sliced it all the way through again. Well, this time I wasn't as surprised when I opened it up and there was another eye in the middle of it. I mean, what was wrong with these avocados? Where were they grown? What is with this just grotesque scene? Well, needless to say, I threw that one away too, and before I even thought about cutting into that third, I had to think to myself for a second. If this one had an eyeball in it, there's something wrong with all the avocados then, right? So, I took my knife and I sliced it, expecting it to go all the way through. But when it stopped, oh hey, I was kind of happy about that. And so I went through the process of carving the avocado, pulling it apart, and then my heart sank. It was another eye. I was kind of concerned why it didn't go all the way through, but then the eye focused on me. I just stood there in the kitchen, looking at that eye. And for some reason, I felt the need to take a bite. Now, say what you will about that being gross, or me being an insane individual for even thinking about it, but I was hungry. And even though I don't like avocados, maybe these ones tasted different, right? So I brought it up to my mouth, and the foul stench was still kind of there, but not enough to deter me. I took a bite. And believe me when I say, it was great. Like I'm talking, instead of it just tasting like slime, it tasted like the best sirloin steak out there. It was just so juicy and so just great. So, I ended up eating that whole avocado. And then I was about to throw away the eye when part of me just thought, maybe I should take a bite of that too. So I did. It was like biting into a crisp apple. a crisp, juicy apple with a slight aftertaste of a hamburger. Okay, so that is about avocados. And then last but not least is water. Now I know what you're thinking. Water can't be that scary, right? I mean, after all, most of our body is comprised of water. Water is on most of the planet. There's nothing creepy or scary about water, right? Well, yeah, you'd be right. It's not so much the water as what's inside the water and what it's made out of. You see, back where I'm from in Colorado, we had a couple of scares when there were these specific kind of amoebas that were found in the water. These amoebas would cause irreversible brain damage. Now, scoff all you want, but that actually happened. And it was a scary, scary thing. So, I'm happy to say that there's none of that happening over here. At least I thought. You know, I drink water all the time, and I thought nothing of it. I went out of the house one day, and I just saw some of my neighbors acting a little bit strange. They were overly friendly. And I'm not saying that my neighbors were not friendly, but they weren't this friendly. They smiled an eerie smile and waved with so much energy that for that part of me thought, you keep waving like that and your hand's gonna fall off. Well, that's an image in my head now. Anyway, I was a little concerned about what happened. And I grew even more concerned when there was a salesman that stopped by the next day, and he handed me this little tub of stuff, and he said, "Make sure to put that in your water supply. It's a great thing." Well, I started saying, I might, but I'm probably not going to.
Oh, I suggest you do. There's so much good that will come from a little bit of happy juice in the water.
Well, after getting a sales pitch like that, how could I ever use it, right? I mean, that's just not the kind of thing that you need. You know, I just put that stuff on the counter and then just went about my day. All the neighbors still acting overly friendly. Went into town, got some groceries. Everyone there was overly friendly. The people at the cash register tried to push some of that happy juice stuff onto me, and that was not something I was really wanting. I mean, why do you need to add some stuff to water, right? So I went and looked it up, and apparently, happy juice was something that, something about a special kind of amoeba, and it would rewire your brain to make you a little bit more happy. Well, I don't really need that. There's just something strange about having a creature go into your brain to make you happy. And there's a lot of people that would say stuff like, our amoeba's actually alive, but they are living organisms. They're some of the most complex ones, even though they're the most simple that are out there. We still know almost nothing about them. We know some things, but we have no idea of most of it. So I'm not going to put any of that in my water, no matter how many times the strange salesman keeps coming by and dropping off packets. Should really label those so people don't use them. Okay. That is the end of this video. I'm probably going to be doing other stuff on the channel soon-ish as well, but I really want to keep these little videos coming, and I'm going to keep uploading them with not a lot of work being done on them for this month anyway, because I don't know too much about editing and that kind of thing. But yeah, I just want to keep recording these videos because it's kind of fun to make up little stories. Kind of makes me remember the kind of days when I was like a kid back in Colorado, and I would gather some of my friends and we would tell these scary stories, kind of like around a campfire, except for it was an apartment complex and we were kind of just like sitting at the landing for the stairs. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you very much, and please remember that you are cared for and you are loved, and have a great rest of your evening and a great day tomorrow. Bye.